guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new I Don't Work Here Lady content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first one is titled, Karen Goes Boom. My parents and I had a family-run handyman, rental property make-ready business for a little over 20 years. As such, we were regular customers at one particular store. About 30-some-odd years ago there was a lumberyard, building supply store in my city that everybody went to for all their building, repair needs. It was a very busy store with lots of well-paid employees to help customers. Each assistant knew their section of the store, and how products were to be used. Then the two big brand box stores moved into town and this lumberyard's business bottomed out. They went from a full knowledgeable staff to a skeleton crew of minimum wage teens, who didn't know the difference between a measuring tape and a yardstick, and the store manager. The manager, it should be noted, was a foul-tempered bastard with zero tolerance dealing with anybody that wasn't a large account contractor. Us old-timers still preferred that store as we knew where everything was. When we needed something we would just go in and get it. No muss, no fuss. Now because the store was so severely understaffed, and the kids didn't know their butts from a hole in the ground, us old-timers were always willing to help people unfamiliar with the store to find whatever they were looking for. The setup. I had gone into the store to get some pipe fittings and do a bit of browsing when I spotted an older gentleman looking lost. I approached him and made an off-hand query if he needed help finding something. The look of relief on his face was palatable. He explained a recent windstorm had damaged the gate on his privacy fence and needed new hinge parts. I've been looking for someone to help me, but I've only found one kid, who knew less than me and was no help. Mr. Gentleman said, with a profound air of annoyance. I told him I understood and explained why the service here was so bad now, and that in the future he should simply ask another customer for help. Odds where the other customer would be a regular who knew what and where. At this point I directed Mr. Gentleman 3 aisles over to where the parts he needed were located. As we stood looking over the gate hardware I made inquiries regarding the damage. It was fortunate that I did, as the damage he described was far more severe than a simple hinge change would fix. As I explained what he would need to do to fix the gate we were interrupted by a clawed hand digging into my shoulder and a screech in my ear, "I need help." Enter the Karen. This lady was of an older generation, caked on makeup, tight-fitting starched jacket and skirt, and impractical stiletto high heels. I simply turned my body, so she was forced to let go. I later checked, and her nails had left marks in my skin. Still, I was raised with manners, so I calmly said, "I don't work here, ma'am." Liar. I saw you helping this man find what he wants. Now it's my turn. Find me this part for my rent house. Karen demanded, while holding up a slip of paper with notes scrawled on it. "I don't work here, ma'am. I'm a customer as well," I said once more while pointing at my clothes, which consisted of black t-shirt, grungy and torn blue jeans, black surplus military boots, all of which were liberally covered in a combination of paint splatters, dry wall spackle, and silicone caulking. Karen ignored what I said. "Look here, you little crap. I am this store's largest customer as I own over 300 rental properties across town and the manager is a good friend of mine. If you don't get me this part now, I will have your ass fired." Now, as I've said, the manager of this store was a nasty piece of work to anybody that didn't have a large bank book. From the looks of Karen's clothing and jewelry I figured she would be someone the manager would brown nose. As I didn't want to risk the manager banning me from the store just to curry favor with this Karen, I decided to just go along and help her find what she was looking for and be done with it. I took the paper and looked at the notes. It was a part for an old gas floor heating furnace. The system was no longer legally code complaint, but that didn't stop property owners from still using the stupid things if they could still find the parts. As I had to pull more than one of these cumbersome suckers out of rent houses after a plumber safely disconnected the gas lines, I knew a thing or two about them, including where the parts should be, if they were available. I excused myself from Mr. Gentleman and took off at a brisk walk. Karen had to struggle to keep up in her too tight pencil skirt and heels. The heating aisle was 3/4 of the way across the store. Karen didn't seem to enjoy the brisk walk. I quickly walked down the aisleway looking for the part in question, and as I thought would be the case, the part was not stocked on the shelves. Just to be sure, I craned my neck to look at the top overstock shelf. To my utter surprise, lo and behold, there were a couple of boxes of the part. Now the real fun starts. I pointed out the part in question to Karen. "Get it," Karen demanded. "I can't. It's in the overstock. Only a store employee is allowed to use the ladder to get something off those shelves." I explained. "You are an employee," Karen screamed in my face. "I've been told I have the patience of a saint, but I have my limits. Rampant stupidity is my Rubicon. Listen here, you great blathering moron. I am not an employee," I screamed right back. "I am a customer. Customer. C-U-S-T-O-M-E-R. A person who buys here, not works here. Go to the front desk and tell whoever is working there you need that part off the overstock. They will get someone who does work here to get the ladder and get the part for you." With that, I walked away. This was a Karen I was dealing with, so we aren't done yet. I had returned to Mr. Gentleman, who should be noted informed me he had a good laugh when he heard me spelling out "customer" at the top of my considerable baritone lungs over halfway across the store. As we were wrapping up our previously interrupted discussion concerning the repairs of his fence gate, a young woman approached Mr. Gentleman and me. Excuse me," she spoke. "Yeah?" I responded. My first thought was she was a customer who needed some help. "I know you don't work here, cause." She pointed to my clothes. "And I'm pretty sure everybody in the state heard you spelling out, customer." Mr. Gentleman snickered. "But since nobody else seems to be around that does work here, I thought I should tell somebody that I just saw that woman pushing the ladder down the same aisle I saw you and that woman in earlier." The young woman said. I was like, "Oh crap." I took off like a rocket heading for the front of the store. It only took me a handful of seconds to get to the registers and ordering counter. As I feared, the only person at the stations was the manager, and he was busy talking to a contractor on the phone. Easy to deduce due to the simple fact he was sounding friendly. I waved my arms to get his attention, and he turned away, ignoring me. I began slapping the counter loudly while yelling his name. He put a finger in his opposite ear to drown out the sounds. "Do you know of those reddish discs of peanut brittle some stores have at the counters? Makes for great projectiles." Mr. Manager was quite vulgar as his displeasure, having had one bounce off his head. I cut off his tirade by yelling that one of his customers was trying to use a stock ladder to get a box off the overstock shelf. That shut him up. Long enough for the both of us to hear a woman's scream of distress echoing across the building. He looked at me with dawning horror, and I simply said, "Heating aisle." We took off running. We found Karen lying at the bottom of the stock ladder, her left foot bare of shoe and twisted around in the opposite direction it should be pointing. Her missing shoe, the stiletto heel protruding through the steel grating, was at the top of the ladder's platform. It was obvious the heel had slipped through the grating. Karen had lost her balance and broke her ankle while falling. Mr. Manager used his walkie-talkie to order a yard guy to call for an ambulance. During the entire time we were waiting for the ambulance to arrive, Karen just kept screaming and screaming. Understandable, being in pain, but sheesh did she have a high pitch. When the medics began to take her away, she pointed at me and yelled at Mr. Manager, "I want him fired." Mr. Manager looked at me, looked at her, back at me, then back to her and spoke. "He doesn't work here, but I'll fire him anyways, okay?" Mr. Gentleman, standing nearby observing the events, busted a gut laughing. The next one is titled, "My Safety Vest Strikes Again, Manhandled in My Wheelchair." So, I've posted before about my safety vest. Due to being in a wheelchair, and people around where I live being utterly vapid, knuckle-dragging and mouth-breathing Neanderthals that don't pay attention, I'm pretty much forced to wear this high-visibility yellow-green safety vest. Where I run into my most constant issue is at a local supermarket. It's owned by Kroger, but locally we know it as Fred Meyer, or Fred Meyers. They're trolley boys, cart wranglers, all wear near identical safety vests to mine. Only theirs actually have black trim added to the vest along with Fred Meyer plastered on the left breast and the back. That, and the employees actually have name tags on. I look like a biker by comparison with my beard, heavy tattoos, all black clothes, and I top it off with a Pride 49 ers hat. I mean, the hat alone should be a clear sign I don't work there, but nope. I should also point out that I'm a voice actor. When I'm out in public, I speak with a posh, North London English accent, as I've found due to implicit bias people tend to treat me better. This comes into play here. This event happened Friday. I headed out to perform what I call the double whammy, picking up my prescriptions from the pharmacy inside Fred Meyer, and doing a bit of food shopping. I waved or greeted my regular employees and managers, as I'm in there so much and so often that I'm a pretty recognizable face. Between my, as I'm told, natural charisma and my appearance, I'm often greeted back warmly, or they greet me initially with politeness and a generally friendly atmosphere by the staff at my supermarket. I had wheeled my chair into the soup aisle. There were so many delicious options that I couldn't decide on what to get. I can be a bit indecisive, and trust me when I say never shop hungry. I don't think I was in the aisle more than 5 minutes when I hear that throat-clearing ahem emanate from behind me. I ignore it, because I've no idea it's meant for me or what. It happens again, and I continue to ignore it. That's when this lady grabbed the handles on my wheelchair and spun me around. It took every ounce of effort not to turn and swing on her, because I had no idea who she was or her intentions, but obviously she had no qualms over grabbing someone's wheelchair and maneuvering them against their will. Before I could say a single word, our Karen in this situation starts to shout, "Hey, when a customer is trying to get your attention, you don't ignore them. I have been trying to get your attention for minutes now," she hadn't, "and I don't like your attitude." I take a deep breath and do my best to unclench my hands from the armrests of my wheelchair. "Madam, I am sorry if I've offended you, I wasn't, but I must inform you that I was cut off. Due to my mental quirks and conditioning as a child, anytime I'm interrupted I get shut completely down and I can't speak till the other person stops talking, so I went silent. I don't want to hear any of your excuses. Just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can get away with being an inconsiderate butthole. The world doesn't revolve around you, that's rich, and there are other people in the world far more in need than you. I have half a mind to wheel you over to the service desk and report you to management." I waited a couple of beats, waiting to see if her rant was going to continue, but it didn't. She gave me a look that I could without any measure of difficulty correctly identify as a "your move" glare. I take another deep breath. "Mum, firstly, it's illegal and sociably irresponsible and outright tactless to manhandle a person's disability conveyance without their consent. That counts as assault. While yelling and screaming at me isn't illegal per se, I don't appreciate it. Tell me, Mum, what incentive do I have to assist you at this point? I don't work here, look me over. I don't have a name tag on, I'm in black jeans and t-shirt with a Gay Pride 49 ers hat on that clearly isn't uniform. I'm just wearing a safety vest, for my safety." Karen looked like she was about to blow her skullcap with the force of Mount St. Helens, Krakatoa, and Tambora combined. Look it up. I honestly don't remember what she said next. It was something about the typical, "how dare you," stacked with her rant about disabled people always thinking they can get away with anything just because they're crippled. That was when she lived up to her threat. She stepped around me, grabbed the handles and began to push me. I was so bewildered, that I froze because I never in 1,000 years would have thought she would actually do this. Now I could have pulled the brake handles on my chair, but that would mean I'd have to take my hand off the merchandise basket in my lap, which would cause it to slip out once we stopped abruptly. Top that off with the fact Karen would smack into my back and the back of my head, and I didn't want that. 2 of the regular checkout attendants at the self-checkout area noticed me being pushed against my will towards customer service. I can just catch one I'm more familiar with. For the purposes of this story, let's call him Owen. Owen, immediately get on his radio. Before I could do anything more, we were at the desk. Karen immediately starts slapping her hand on the counter in that typical, "Hey barkeep" kind of manner. A manager, a woman in her late 20s or 30s we'll call Amanda, turns to the Karen. Amanda is quite tall and loaded down with Marvel Comics tattoos, and we're very familiar with one another. Karen launches into a full-blown tirade, accusing me of this, that, and everything from incompetence to an all-out disregard for customer service. Amanda just blinked and said, he doesn't work here." "What do you mean he doesn't work here? He's wearing a safety vest, and your employees wear the same ones." "Well, ours say Fred Meyer on them. We also issue name tags for all employees for transparency, so if you have an issue you know who they are. Op is a customer, he's in here at least 4 times a week." I could hear the hamster wheels turning in Karen's head. "So he doesn't work here? Let me speak to the store manager just in case." Amanda sighed, picked up her phone, and began to call the store manager. However, that call didn't finish, as the head of Fred Meyer Security, let's call him Clark, came striding over looking quite pissed. Clark is a mountain of a man. 6 feet minus 5 inches, 250 pounds, and built like a lumberjack. Ma'am, what are you doing to op? You really just grabbed a disabled person's wheelchair and moved them without their consent. Well, that wasn't a question. You don't do that. Not at my store. But can it? You need to come with me right now. If looks could kill, I'd be dead twice over between Karen's, you little bastard, glare, and Clark's, done screwed up, look meant for Karen. Karen was escorted off to the security area in the back, sputtering like an old Edsel. Amanda asked if I was alright. I said I really wasn't, that things had been difficult for me this last week. I won't disclose them here, and this really spiked my anxiety. I'm just going to go home. Amanda did her best to comfort me. She stepped out of the booth and patted me on the shoulder. Owen, the self-checkout attendant, also asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't really. He offered, if I was comfortable, to push me back out to my car. I accepted. Amanda gave me a card and told me that when I was ready I could use that number to have my groceries delivered, and for my trouble she'd waive the fee for delivery. I thanked her and said that'd be best for now. Owen wheeled me out to my car, helped me get my wheelchair in my trunk, and I drove home. Update. At the behest of several readers, my husband, and my immediate friends, family, I've set up an appointment to speak with the store manager, Clark, the security lead, and my local sheriff to go about filing official charges. I attended the meeting with the manager who was on duty the hour of the incident, Clark the security guard lead, my lawyer, and my local sheriff. As of this moment, the matter is now out of my hands. Sheriff's department is moving ahead with an arrest, and my lawyer is working on a prosecution. I can't disclose the details of the civil part of the case until the matter is considered closed. For the wonderful people who suggested I file kidnapping charges, it turns out there's a specific charge for what she did. It's called transporting. Transporting is the act of manipulating an individual through some means, intimidation, physical manipulation, or threat, from one place to another against their will. In my area, kidnapping requires a prolonged detention. As she ultimately pushed me to the kiosk then let go of my chair, legally speaking she had no further control of my movements and it didn't count as kidnapping. My lawyer and I are working on the transporting charge at this time. Clark, and nice manager, as well as some of the clerks that witnessed, all handed in statements to the sheriff on my behalf. He isn't a lawyer but says there's a mountain of evidence that makes it highly unlikely she'll squeak away without some charge sticking. Thank you all for your support, kind words, and suggestions. The next one is titled, No Random Lady, Your Bratty Daughter Cannot Ride My Horse. I, 20F, was grooming my horse Clyde yesterday when a woman came up to me, tugging along a kid around 6 or 7. For context, the stable hands, trainers don't need to wear specific clothes, although they usually wear the stable's shirts to be more recognizable towards new people. I was wearing some tan breeches and a red polo, nothing really special, but I tended to get confused as staff pretty often, which I understand. The Karen was wearing way too expensive looking clothes to be at a barn, but I assumed she was just going to drop off the kid and come back at the end of the lesson. As I saw her direct her attention towards me, I prepared my whole speech about how I didn't work there and where I could direct you to go. Before I could even get a word out she launched into a tirade about how terrible the service was and how she had spent hours trying to find someone to help her. I doubt it was more than 5 minutes, the stable wasn't that big. Oh, I began, being cut off by her screaming in my face to let her kid ride my horse. I tried to calmly explain that no, her kid couldn't ride my horse and no, she cannot let her ride any other horses in the barn. Not matter what I said, I couldn't convince her that I didn't work there and that couldn't just let her daughter ride. Clyde is not fully trained as I recently got him, and still very young and inexperienced. I wouldn't even let a kid groom him, as he tends to nip at people. The kid proceeded to try to duck past me and try to pet his nose. I grabbed the kid's shoulder and gently pushed her back, genuinely worried about Clyde biting her. Karen gasped and screamed, "My daughter has every right to touch that horse. She's probably even better with horses than you are. Besides you're just a worker so you don't dare push my kid." That made me blow my casket. Your daughter is not going to touch my horse. He is not suitable with kids and could injure your daughter. Your daughter does not know more than me. I've been riding for 15 years, and I don't work here. Leave me alone, I shouted, wanting to punch that Karen straight in the face. At this point my horse was starting to freak out and I turned to lead him back to his stall and just calm him and myself. Some band staff came running over, trying to assess what was happening. The woman kept screaming at me, but I just couldn't deal with her anymore and walked away, since the staff had her occupied. My friend, who worked there, told me that they had to threaten to call the cops to get her to leave, because she kept demanding to have her child ride every single horse she saw. She is also banned from the stable now, so happy ending at least. The next one is titled, "No ma'am, my pink hoodie and I don't work at Walmart." I'm a frequent attendee to Wally World along with my mother and grandmother, so we have a system. My mom usually helps grandma in and out of the car while I fetch the motorized carts for her to use, and after a typical trip to the store, buying what we need, adding things we don't, grandma forgetting one thing and leaving the checkout line to get it, my mom repeating her mantra she can't go to jail for murder, we finally get out and I'm returning the cart to the store. Just before I reach the store, a lady in her van calls and asks if her mother can have the cart. Now I know it's rude to give the cart away when someone else has already been waiting for it, but you must understand, when I saw this woman's mother, I was concerned she would keel over before she even exited her car. She was as old as my grandmother, but I'm sure my grandma, who has metal pins in her shoulder and needs double knee surgery, could beat this woman in a foot race and back, so as butthole-ish as it may have been, I agreed to give them the cart. Getting off the cart, I offered my arm to the lady and escorted her the 3 feet to the cart and helped her in. This is the IDWHL part. Before she sat down, she asked me, "Do you work here, dear?" "No, I don't," I said while smiling. I was after all wearing a regular t-shirt, denim blue jeans, beaten-up jogging shoes, and my favorite pink hoodie with a bedazzled skull on the back. I think the lady's daughter also thought I worked there for a moment because she let out a surprised thank you as she herself got out of the car. "Bless you," the older lady said while she and her daughter went into Wally World, and I went to my own car. Mom sort of scolded me for giving the cart away when I told them the story, and I know some out there will say worse, but honestly I just couldn't say no to that lady. I hope she's doing well wherever she is. The next one is titled, "Dad doesn't approve of school's sex ed class, so offers his own in competition with the school." My good friend works in administration at the high school, and she's had her share of stories over the years, but wow, is this one a roller coaster. The high school offers sex ed every year as part of the mandatory health credit. Families are free to opt their kids out of sex ed if they wish, but the kids still have to participate in the alternative health course offering. All of the students take the same introductory portion before splitting off into sex ed and those who have opted out. This initial section covers, among other things, the dynamics of a healthy relationship, including matters of consent. Right away, as in, immediately after the first day, a father tried to remove his son from the class. It was explained to him that he couldn't opt out of this portion. He was furious, posting these long rants on the town Facebook page and on the school's parent portal and I'm sure elsewhere, about how the class was political, and we were shaming his son for being a man, and it was up to the families to teach these private subjects so the school should stay out. He took issue with the lessons on habitually asking for consent, but also on the importance of discussing emotions freely, healthy division of labor between romantic partners, and avoiding sexual harassment. This is how this guy began to develop a following. Parents would say they disagreed with him on almost everything he was spouting, but that they were in lockstep that it wasn't the school's place to teach kids about personal topics like relationships. He started camping outside of the building while his son's section of the class was being taught and shouting his own theories and beliefs at kids as they walked into the building, even handing out a pamphlet he got off some junk website. The school is set up as such so that it's easy to be on a public thoroughfare but still within full view of a classroom, so we didn't have legal grounds to send him packing. His supporters would honk their horns or even occasionally stop by to bring him cold drinks and sandwiches. It was nuts. Then one day towards the end of the non-optional portion of the class they had a police officer coming in to talk to everyone about how to report a sexual assault, know if you've been assaulted, and what to expect when you go to make your report, etc. The officer's own daughter is a student at the high school, so he was extra protective of the whole group. When he saw this guy standing outside the building shouting about how mutual consent is for the weak, he wasted no time shoving him off. This happened right outside of the main administrative building. The guy tried to argue, "I'm on public land, I have a right to be here and say whatever I want," and started quoting some city ordinance thinking he'd really gotten one over on the veteran police officer. Nope, he wasted no time informing him, "You are causing a disturbance. You can leave or I can remove you. You've got about 10 seconds to decide." He is watching him get in his car to be sure he actually left, and apparently the guy made a few more smart comments to him about how the blacks are right, there really are no good cops left these days. But luckily the officer didn't let any of those gross comments provoke him and just said, "Sir, everyone certainly has a right to hold their own opinions and express their views. But when and how you do it matters in the eyes of the law. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater, you can't contradict teachers outside of their classrooms at the school. You are hearing me?" At first blush the guy was not hearing him, because he drove off without response, and that story in and of itself spread like wildfire around town. However, for everyone who pasted him as a laughingstock for making such a display, there was someone else who saw him as a hero fighting the system. And, it turns out, he was actually listening closer to the officer's warnings than any of us would have liked. The optional sex ed portion began the following week, and this fool had begun placing Facebook ads, not the paid kind but just posting his own ads from his account, for his own sex ed class. Because he can say whatever he wants in the appropriate setting, right? What sort of negligent, ass backwards, head in the sand kind of parent you have to be to let your child leave school in the middle of the day to attend, as he dubbed it, sex ed for real men, inside a stranger's house, a private citizen unaffiliated with the school, is beyond me. But the group who'd begun to follow his whole campaign and support him online and such was all for it and actually deliberately sent their kids to him. To be fair, he did advertise it as being totally non-sexual in nature, with his big driver being that those discussions should be left to the parents, and he was offering a class that covered traditional morals, values, and chivalry, promising to take us back to the good old days. He also had plenty of stuff about how his taxes pay the school salary, so if enough people made their preferences clear the faculty would have to fall in line and stop disseminating harmful materials. As far as we knew this guy had a job, so he must have taken considerable time off to make this happen. A significant chunk of the male students, about a fifth, withdrew in favor of sex ed for real men. Some satirically more so than seriously, but still, even one was too many in my book regardless of reasoning. My friends and I managed to get our hands on a copy of a portion of the syllabus that was leaked, and it covered things like the man's and woman's role in the relationship, what's appropriate after how many dates, rounding the bases, and some random survival skills training was mixed in as well, grouped under making yourself desirable. As this was going on, he sent taunting letters to the school faculty letting them know how popular his class was and how great it was going, as though his son didn't still have to continue attending there and he, the dad, didn't have an ongoing relationship with the faculty, plus at least one more kid who hasn't hit high school yet. Whenever he was on campus to watch his son in a game or just pick him up, he made a point of telling the faculty involved in health class what a better job he was doing of teaching than they ever did and how he was saving the immoral world by righteously luring kids into his basement during school hours. By the end of the semester, which just wrapped up, he was genuinely expecting some sort of white flag from the high school side. When they called him in for a meeting, he was all set to gloat and even, charitably, or so he thought, conceded that the people at school were just doing their jobs, and couldn't help that he was better at teaching than they were because he was working with fewer bureaucratic restrictions. The faculty patiently listened to this as he wouldn't let them get a word in edgewise, before finally informing him that his son would need to take summer school, because while sex ed was optional, the alternative, on-campus, course was required in its place. This man was somehow shocked to learn his son couldn't just be pulled out of school midday every week for months. The school explained they'd sent letters home and called but never heard back from him, which is why they were having this meeting, which was a fiasco to schedule in and of itself. Everyone is guessing he just didn't open any letters from the school and didn't bother listening to their messages. So, he started talking about how his son had taken a health class, and he had a right to teach his own son if he preferred, and on and on. They replied that if he wanted to homeschool his son he was free to do so, however, he'd have to unenroll him from public school and register his son as a homeschooler. He could not switch between his own lessons and public school on a whim. He was enraged by this and felt wholly entitled to circumvent state regulations and even federal procedures in order to, well, basically do whatever he wanted. So, he said his son would just fail health and that he took it as a badge of honor. The school said that was his prerogative, however, in that case his son would not be promoted to the next grade level, as it was a required credit. This really blustered him, and he left. Then, after a few days of thinking about it, informed the school in writing that he would be unenrolling his son and registering him somewhere else. The school cheerfully informed him that would be fine, but he couldn't enroll him as matriculating into the coming grade, because they could not certify his passing until he completed all required credits for his current year. A logistical note: the other students in Sex Ed for Real Men were not facing summer school because their health class was scheduled at a separate time, so they took it in addition to the credit-bearing in-school alternative. Those in the same period block as his son just didn't take this guy's class or withdrew to return to school after receiving the first notice home. So, now, unfortunately, his son is bearing the weight of his entitled parents' poor choices. But not alone. Busing is significantly decreased during summer school, so from what I understand, his father will have to wake up early every day to drive him in. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.